My name is Sasha Banks. I am 34 years old, and to my family, I am a ghost, a disappointment, a woman who wears boring black suits, drives a 5-year-old Honda, and works as a lowly data entry clerk. That is the lie I let them believe. In reality, I am a corporate liquidator. When billion-dollar companies collapse, banks call me. I am the one who walks into a boardroom, assesses the assets, fires the CEO, and decides what is worth selling and what is trash. I am cold, I am efficient, and I am very, very wealthy. But my family sees none of that. To Reverend Thomas and First Lady Lucinda, image is everything, and I simply did not fit the picture. The night of the anniversary party, the humidity in Atlanta was suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the cold knot in my stomach as I pulled up to the Ritz-Carlton. I had paid for this entire event. The crystal chandeliers, the 5-course meal, the open bar serving top-shelf champagne. I had wired the $50,000 anonymously through a shell company so that Hunter, my sister's husband, could take the credit. I just wanted my parents to have a good night. I parked my Honda a block away so it would not be seen next to the valet stand, took a deep breath, and walked toward the entrance. I was wearing a simple black tailored suit. It was from the row and cost $4,000, but to the untrained eye, it looked plain. As I reached the glass doors, a large security guard stepped in front of me, his hand raised. "Staff entrance is around the back, miss," he said, not even looking me in the eye. "Kitchen staff and servers need to use the loading dock." I opened my mouth to correct him, to tell him I was a guest, but a familiar screeching voice stopped me. "That is right, officer. Send her to the back." I turned to see my mother Lucinda stepping out of a limousine. She looked like a disco ball exploded. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that was too tight, a massive wig that defied gravity, and enough fake jewelry to sink a ship. She walked over to me, her eyes scanning my outfit with pure disgust. "Mom, I am a guest," I said quietly. "You look like a waiter, Sasha," she snapped, adjusting her diamond necklace. "Actually, that is an insult to waiters. They at least dress with some flair. Look at you. No makeup, hair pulled back in that severe bun. You look like you are going to a funeral, not a celebration." "It is a black tie event, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is formal wear." "It is depressing," she countered, waving her hand as if shooing away a fly. "Listen to me. Hunter and Destiny are inside. They have invited important people, investors, church elders, people who matter. I do not want them seeing you walking in the front door looking like this. It ruins the aesthetic." I felt the familiar sting in my chest. The aesthetic. That was all I was to her, a blemish on her perfect picture. "So you want me to use the service entrance?" I asked, my voice flat. With the garbage, Lucinda leaned in close, her breath smelling of expensive mints covering up the smell of gin. "I want you to be invisible, Sasha. If you insist on coming to eat our food, the least you can do is not embarrass us. Your Honda is parked down the street, right? Good. I do not want that rust bucket parked next to Destiny's Porsche. Now go around the back." She turned on her heel and swept into the hotel, greeting the doorman with a fake high-pitched laugh that made my skin crawl. I stood there for a moment, gripping the black gift box in my hand. Inside was the truth. Inside was my freedom. I looked at the security guard. He at least had the decency to look ashamed. Around the back, he mumbled, looking at his shoes. I walked through the humidity to the loading dock. The smell of rotting vegetables and exhaust fumes filled the air. I had to dodge a delivery truck unloading crates of lobster, the same lobster I had paid for. I walked through the steamy, chaotic kitchen, dodging waiters carrying silver trays. The heat was intense, melting the composure I had spent all day building. One of the chefs shouted at me to grab a tray, assuming I was late for a shift. I ignored him and pushed through the swinging double doors into the ballroom. The transition was jarring. The air conditioning hit me like a wall of ice. The room was bathed in soft golden light. A jazz band was playing smoothly in the corner. Round tables draped in white silk filled the room, centered around a massive ice sculpture of my parents' initials. It was perfect. It was expensive. and I was the only reason it existed. I stayed in the shadows near the kitchen doors for a moment, scanning the room. I saw them immediately. The head table. It was set on a raised platform like a throne room. My father, Reverend Thomas, was holding court, laughing loudly, his gold tooth sparkling. Next to him sat my sister Destiny. Destiny was the golden child. She was 29, beautiful in an Instagram filter kind of way, and completely useless. She was wearing a red dress that I knew cost $6,000 because I saw the charge on my American Express statement last week. She was laughing at something her husband Hunter was saying. Hunter. Just looking at him made my blood boil. He was a tall, mediocre white man who had convinced my family he was a tech genius. He threw around words like blockchain and synergy, but in 3 years he had never launched a single product. He lived in my parents' house rent-free, drove the car I paid for, and currently he was standing up tapping a spoon against his champagne glass. Attention, everyone! Hunter announced, his voice booming without a microphone. The room went quiet. He had that unearned confidence of a man who has never faced a consequence in his life. I just want to propose a toast to the most amazing in-laws a man could ask for. Lucinda Thomas, 40 years. That is incredible, and I am just so happy that my startup Technova could sponsor this little get-together for you. You deserve the best. The room erupted in applause. My mother wiped a fake tear from her eye. My father patted Hunter on the back. I felt bile rise in my throat. Technova had exactly $40 in its bank account. I knew because I monitored it to make sure he wasn't using my sister's identity to open credit lines. I stepped out of the shadows and began the long walk toward the head table. I kept my head high, clutching the black box against my chest. As I moved through the tables, the whispers started. I heard a woman from the church choir whisper, "Is that Sasha Lord? She looks tired." Another person whispered, "I heard she is still single." Such a shame compared to Destiny. I reached the head table just as Hunter was sitting down. He looked up and his smile instantly vanished, replaced by a look of sneering amusement. "Well, well, look who finally decided to show up," Hunter said loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his champagne. "We were starting to think you got lost on the bus." I ignored him and looked at my parents. "Happy anniversary," I said, my voice steady. My father didn't even look at me. He was busy inspecting a spot on his fork. "You are late, Sasha. And you came in through the kitchen. I saw you come out the service doors. Mom told me to," I said. Lucinda glared at me. "I told you to use the discreet entrance. Do not make it sound like I banished you. Sit down somewhere." "Not here. This table is for family and VIPs. There is a spot back there by the bathrooms, I think." I did not move. I stood my ground. Hunter chuckled, picking up a crab cake. "Come on," Lucinda cut her some slack. "Sasha probably needs a good meal." "I heard you were late on your rent again, Sasha. What happened? Did they cut your hours at the typing factory?" He took a bite of the crab cake crumbs falling onto his expensive lapel. "Don't worry about it. Tonight is on me. Eat as much as you want. Pack a doggy bag for tomorrow. I know how it is when you are struggling. We don't want you starving in that basement apartment of yours." The table erupted in laughter. My sister Destiny touched Hunter's arm, giggling. "Oh, stop it, baby. You are so bad." Then she turned to me, flashing the 3-carat diamond ring on her finger. The ring I had paid for when Hunter claimed he was short on cash and would pay me back next week. That was 2 years ago. "You really should learn from Hunter, Sasha." "Destiny," said her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "He is so ambitious. A provider. Maybe if you fixed yourself up a bit, you could find a man who could take care of you so you wouldn't have to be such a burden on Mom and Dad." A burden. The word hung in the air. I looked at my mother. She was sipping her wine, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at my father. He was nodding in agreement with Destiny. "I am not a burden," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, please," Lucinda snapped, finally looking at me. Who paid for your braces? Who put a roof over your head for 18 years? And now look at you. 34 years old. No husband, no career, coming to my party empty-handed, looking like a beggar. I am not empty-handed, I said. I stepped forward and placed the black box directly in the center of the table, right next to the ice sculpture. The heavy cardstock made a solid sound against the tablecloth. My father picked up his microphone again. "Oh, what is this? Let us see what our daughter has scraped together. Hopefully, it is not another homemade coupon book like when she was 10. He laughed at his own joke. The crowd laughed with him. They were expecting a blender, maybe a picture frame. They were expecting the desperate offering of a failure trying to buy love. "Open it," I said. Lucinda reached out her long acrylic nails, tapping on the lid. She didn't open it. She just lifted the box, felt its weight, and frowned. "It is papers," she said, disgust filling her face. She dropped the box. "It is just paper. What is this, Sasha? A poem? A letter about your feelings? We do not have time for your emotional baggage tonight." "It is not a poem," I said. Hunter reached over and shoved the box toward the edge of the table. "Get this trash out of here. You heard your mother. We are celebrating success tonight, not whatever this is." The box teetered on the edge and fell to the floor. That was the moment. That was the exact second the last thread of loyalty snapped. I looked at the box on the floor. Then I looked at Hunter, whose face was flushed with expensive wine. I looked at Destiny, preening in her stolen luxury. I looked at my parents, who viewed me as nothing more than a stain on their reputation. I realized I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted their destruction. I bent down and picked up the box. I dusted it off slowly. The room was watching now. The tension was thick enough to choke on. "You are right," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "I am a freeloader. I don't belong at this table." I turned to walk away. And Sasha Hunter called out, "Do not forget to validate your parking." "Oh wait, you parked on the street to save $5, didn't you?" I stopped. I turned back one last time. "Enjoy the lobster, Hunter," I said. "It is the last expensive meal you will ever eat." I walked out of the ballroom past the stunned silence of the guests and pushed through the double doors. As soon as I was in the hallway, I pulled out my phone. My hands were not shaking. I was perfectly calm. I dialed the number for my personal banker. "It is Sasha," I said. "Execute Order 66. Cancel the cards. All of them. And call the hotel management. Tell them the line of credit for the Banks party is closed. Immediately." I hung up and walked toward the exit. I did not go out the back way this time. I walked straight through the front lobby, past the gold leaf mirrors and the fresh orchids. As I stepped out into the humid Atlanta night, I checked my watch. It was 8 p.m. By 8:15, the music would stop. By 8:30, the screaming would start. Back inside the ballroom, the nightmare was just beginning for them. But for me, for the first time in my life, I felt light. I got into my Honda, started the engine, and waited. I didn't drive away. I wanted to see the fireworks. 15 minutes later, the first text message popped up on my phone. It was from Hunter. "Your card isn't working. Fix it. Now." I smiled. I put the phone in the passenger seat and watched the entrance of the hotel. The show was about to start. Inside the ballroom, the scene was descending into chaos. The general manager of the Ritz-Carlton, a man named Mr. Henderson, whom I had worked with on a liquidation case 3 years ago, was walking toward the head table. He was not smiling. He held a black leather folio in his hand. Hunter was in the middle of ordering another bottle of Dom Perignon when Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Mr. Hunter Wilson." Mr. Henderson asked politely but firmly. Hunter turned, grinning. "That is me, CEO of Technova. What can I do for you?" "Bring the bottle." "I am afraid I cannot do that, sir," Mr. Henderson said. "In fact, I need to ask you to settle the current balance on the account immediately." Hunter laughed nervous laughter. "What?" "Just put it on the card on file. The Amex Black." "We did attempt to run the card, sir," Mr. Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave so the guests wouldn't hear. But the room was so quiet everyone heard anyway. The card has been reported lost or stolen. The issuer has ordered us to confiscate it. That is impossible, Hunter shouted, standing up. That is my card. Try it again. We tried it 3 times, sir. It is declined. Code 05. Do not honor. Destiny stood up, her face pale. There must be a mistake. We are good for it. My husband is a millionaire. Then perhaps he has another form of payment, Mr. Henderson suggested. The current bill for the venue, the catering, and the bar tab is $45,320. We require payment now to continue service. 45,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Hunter patted his pockets frantically. He pulled out a debit card. Try this one. Mr. Henderson took it, produced a portable card reader, and inserted the card. He waited. The machine beeped a harsh rejection tone. Insufficient funds, Mr. Henderson said. Murmurs rippled through the room. The church elders were exchanging glances. Lucinda looked like she was going to faint. She grabbed Thomas's arm. Thomas, do something. This is humiliating. Thomas stood up, puffing out his chest. Now see here, I am a man of God. This is my anniversary. How dare you disrupt this celebration? We will pay you tomorrow. We are the Banks family. I am sorry, Reverend Mr. Henderson said, signaling to the security team. But the contract was clear. The primary funding source has been revoked. Unless you can pay the full amount right now, I have to ask you to vacate the premises. And we will be keeping the gifts as collateral until the debt is settled. The gifts! Lucinda shrieked. You cannot take my gifts. It is hotel policy for unpaid events. Mr. Henderson lied smoothly. I had told him to say that. Hunter pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped it. I will call the bank. It is just a glitch. It has to be a glitch. He dialed the number on the back of his declined card. He put it on speaker, trying to prove a point to the room. Welcome to American Express, the automated voice said. We are sorry, but this account has been closed by the primary account holder. If you are an authorized user, please contact the primary account holder for assistance. The primary account holder. Everyone at the table froze. They all knew Hunter didn't have the credit score to get a black card. They all knew he was an authorized user. But they had deluded themselves into thinking the primary holder was some business partner or investor. Who closed it? Hunter yelled at the phone. Who is the primary holder? For security reasons, we cannot disclose that information. The robot voice replied. Goodbye. The line went dead. Hunter looked at Destiny. Destiny looked at her parents. And then slowly, the realization began to dawn on Lucinda. Her eyes widened. She looked at the empty chair where I had been sitting. She looked at the spot on the floor where she had thrown the black box. Sasha, she whispered. No, Hunter stammered. No way. Sasha makes $12 an hour. She cannot have an Amex Black. She drives a Honda. Lucinda grabbed her phone and dialed my number. Outside in my car, I watched my screen light up. Mom calling. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I declined it. Inside, the lights in the ballroom flickered and then dimmed to half brightness. The music stopped abruptly. Waiters began moving through the room, clearing plates that were still half full. I am afraid the party is over, Mr. Henderson announced to the room. Please make your way to the exits. The humiliation was absolute. Guests were standing up, whispering, clutching their purses. The church choir director was shaking her head in judgment. My father was shouting about suing the hotel. My mother was sobbing not because the party was over, but because she looked like a fool. And Hunter was slumped in his chair staring at the declined receipt. I started my car engine. The air conditioning felt cool against my face. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb just as the front doors of the Ritz-Carlton burst open. I saw my family stumbling out, arguing with the valet, looking for a car they couldn't pay to retrieve. I drove home to my real apartment. Not the basement unit in a shared house that I kept as a decoy, but the penthouse in Buckhead with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I poured myself a glass of vintage red wine, kicked off my heels, and sat on my Italian leather sofa. I placed the black box on the coffee table. They hadn't opened it. They didn't know yet. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the sheriff would arrive at their house, my house, and he would serve them the papers inside this box. Part 1 of the lesson was complete embarrassment. Part 2 was coming tomorrow, homelessness. I took a sip of wine and watched the city lights. My phone buzzed again. A text from Destiny. You bitch. Whatever you did, fix it. Mom is hyperventilating. We are the laughingstock of the church. I didn't reply. I just opened the black box and took out the eviction notice. I signed the bottom line with a flourish. Being a freeloader has its perks, I said to the empty room. You don't have to pay for the cleanup. The silence in the ballroom was heavy, a suffocating blanket that seemed to trap the air in my lungs. All eyes were glued to the center of the head table, where the black matte box sat like a dark void amidst the sparkling crystal and white floral arrangements. My mother, Lucinda, stared at it with a mixture of greed and suspicion. I could see the gears turning in her mind. She was calculating. Maybe it was a key to a used car. Maybe it was a check. Maybe, just maybe, her disappointing daughter had finally scraped together enough savings to buy her the diamond tennis bracelet she had been hinting at for months. She reached out, her long manicured fingers hovering over the red ribbon. The large diamond on her ring finger, a ring I had paid for 3 years ago when my father claimed the church offerings were light glinted under the chandelier light. She pulled the ribbon. It came undone with a soft, silken whisper. She lifted the lid. I watched her face closely. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to etch the transition of her expression into my memory forever. I watched as the anticipation in her eyes died, replaced instantly by confusion, and then a sharp, jagged anger. There was no velvet cushion inside. There was no sparkle of gold or silver. There was just paper. 3 thick, stapled documents resting on the bottom of the box. Lucinda did not take them out. She did not put on her reading glasses to see that the top document was titled Deed of Transfer, and the second was labeled Mortgage Discharge. She saw paper, and in her world paper meant nothing. Paper was what poor people gave. Paper was a poem. Paper was a handmade card. Paper was an insult. Her lip curled in a snarl that distorted her perfectly made-up face. She looked up at me, her eyes black with rage. "Is this a joke?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "It is not a joke," I replied calmly. "It is the truth." "The truth," she screeched, her voice cracking the sophisticated atmosphere of the room. "I do not want your truth, Sasha. I wanted a gift. I wanted respect. Look at this." She grabbed the box with both hands and with a violent shove hurled it off the table. The box hit the marble floor with a sickening slap. The papers spilled out, sliding across the polished surface like debris from a crash. The deed to the house came to rest against the leg of Hunter's chair. The eviction notice slid under the table. "You come into my party looking like a servant and you bring me trash," Lucinda yelled, standing up now, her chest heaving. "I told you, Sasha. I told you specifically. If you did not have the money to buy a decent gift, you should not have come. I gave you a chance to be part of this family tonight. I gave you a seat at the VIP table. And you insult me with stationery. Mom, please," I started, though. My heart wasn't in the plea. "Shut up," she screamed, pointing a finger at my face. "Just shut up. I am sick of your excuses. I am sick of your poverty dragging us down. Look at your sister. Look at Destiny. She gave us a trip to Hawaii. She gave us pride. You give me paper. Pick up your garbage and get out." The room was deadly silent. 200 guests, the elite of Atlanta's religious community, were watching a mother disown her daughter over a gift box. I saw the choir director look down at her plate. I saw the deacon shake his head. But no one said a word. They were all too afraid of Lucinda Banks. Then Hunter decided to speak. He leaned back in his chair, picking his teeth with a cocktail stick, looking at the papers scattered on the floor with amusement. He didn't know that the paper resting against his shoe was the document that proved he didn't own the roof over his head. "You heard her?" Sasha Hunter said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You are ruining the vibe. Honestly, it is pathetic. You are 34 years old. Why are you still acting like a moody teenager?" "I am not the one throwing a tantrum." "Hunter," I said, my voice ice cold. He laughed, a short barking sound. "No, you are just the one mooching off everyone else. A freeloader. That is what you are. You live in that basement apartment, probably eating ramen noodles, and you come here to eat the steak and lobster that I paid for." He stood up, towering over the table, playing the role of the protective son-in-law. "We don't need your cheap gift, Sasha. We don't need your negative energy. Take your trash and get out. Go back to your sad little life and let the successful people celebrate. Do it for the fresh air. You are polluting the room." My father, Reverend Thomas, nodded in agreement. "Go on, child. Listen to your mother. We will pray for you, but you need to leave." I looked at them, really looked at them. For years I had seen them through the lens of a daughter seeking validation. I had seen them as flawed but lovable. I had made excuses for their greed. I had covered their debts. I had hidden my success so I wouldn't outshine them. But now the lens shattered. I didn't see parents. I didn't see a sister. I saw parasites. I saw 3 people who had drained my bank account of over $1 million in a decade, and they were still hungry for more. I looked down at the papers on the floor. I could have bent down. I could have picked them up, forced them to read the deed, forced them to see that I owned them. I could have ended it right there. But that would have been too merciful. They didn't deserve to know the truth yet. They deserved the fear that was coming. I straightened my blazer. I smoothed the lapel of my $4,000 suit. I lifted my chin. "I will not pick up the box," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried to the back of the room. Lucinda laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Of course you won't. You are too lazy to even clean up your own mess. I am leaving Mom. I am leaving Dad. And Hunter." I looked him dead in the eye. "Enjoy the party." I turned my back on them. "Don't come back until you have a real gift," Lucinda shouted after me. "And don't expect any leftovers." I stopped for 1 second. I didn't turn around. I spoke to the air in front of me. "I am going. But remember this moment. Remember that you were the ones who told me to leave. You were the ones who threw the gift away. When the sun comes up tomorrow, do not say I didn't warn you. Don't you dare regret this." "Get out," Hunter yelled. I walked. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. I walked past the tables of gawking guests. I walked past the ice sculpture that was already beginning to melt, dripping water onto the expensive tablecloth like tears. I walked past the waiters who looked at me with pity. They didn't know the pity was wasted. They should have been pitying the people at the head table. I pushed through the heavy double doors of the ballroom, and the noise instantly cut off. The silence of the corridor was beautiful. It was clean. It was honest. I walked through the lobby, ignoring the concierge. I stepped out into the humid night air. The valet looked at me, expecting a ticket. I shook my head and walked down the block to my Honda. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The leather of the steering wheel felt cool under my palms. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of my own independence. I was alone. I was disowned. And I had never felt more powerful. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I navigated to the authorized users section. There it was, the Platinum business account. The account that funded the venue, the account that paid for the catering, the account that Hunter was currently using to buy rounds of drinks for the entire room. My thumb hovered over the red button that said, "Suspend all activity." I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. I thought about the box on the floor. I thought about the word freeloader. I pressed the button. A small loading circle spun for a second, and then a green checkmark appeared. Card suspended. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror at the glowing lights of the Ritz-Carlton. Inside, the credit card terminal was about to decline. Inside, the music was about to stop. The freeloader had just cut the power. 15 minutes after I drove my Honda away from the Ritz-Carlton, the atmosphere inside the Crystal Ballroom had shifted from celebratory to gluttonous. Without my presence to serve as a reminder of reality, my family had indulged in their delusion of grandeur. Hunter, my brother-in-law, was acting like a king on his coronation day. He had ordered 3 more bottles of Dom Perignon, the vintage reserve that cost $2,000 a bottle. He was laughing loudly, his arm draped over the back of his chair, while my sister Destiny fed him a chocolate-covered strawberry. My parents, Reverend Thomas and Lucinda, were beaming clinking glasses with the city councilman they were trying to impress. They truly believed they had won. They believed they had successfully bullied the family scapegoat into silence and were now free to enjoy the fruits of their cruelty. But the bill always comes due. At 8:15, exactly, the heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open. This time, it was not a waiter carrying a tray of appetizers. It was Mr. Henderson, the hotel general manager. He was flanked by 2 large security guards who looked more like linebackers than hospitality staff. Mr. Henderson held a black leather folio in his hand, and his face was set in a grim line that spelled disaster. The jazz band was in the middle of a saxophone solo when Mr. Henderson approached the head table. He did not wait for a break in the conversation. He walked straight up to Hunter, who was in the middle of a boastful story about his imaginary tech empire. "Mr. Wilson," Mr. Henderson said, his voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. "We need to settle the account. Now." Hunter looked up, annoyed. His face was flushed with alcohol and arrogance. "Not now, Henderson. Can't you see I am entertaining? Just put it on the tab. I told you, run the card on file at the end of the night." Mr. Henderson did not blink. "I am afraid that is no longer an option, sir. The card on file has been flagged. We require immediate payment for the services rendered up to this minute." Hunter rolled his eyes and let out an exaggerated sigh for the benefit of the guests. He reached into his suit jacket pocket and pulled out the heavy black American Express card. It was the Centurion card, the ultimate status symbol, the card that I had worked 80-hour weeks to qualify for. The card that Hunter carried around like a golden ticket, even though his name was only on it as a secondary user. "Fine," Hunter snapped, thrusting the card at the manager. "Here, run it again, and add a $5,000 tip for yourself so you can stop bothering me." My mother, Lucinda, chuckled. "Oh, Hunter, you are too generous. These people are just doing their job even if they are rude about it." Mr. Henderson took the card. He produced a portable payment terminal from his pocket. He inserted the black metal card. The entire table went silent watching the transaction. It was a performance of wealth, and they were the stars. The machine beeped. It was a sharp, discordant sound. A red light flashed on the top of the terminal. Mr. Henderson looked at the screen, then looked at Hunter. "Declined," he said flatly. Hunter laughed. "That is impossible. It is a black card. There is no limit. You probably have a bad Wi-Fi connection in here. Try it again." Mr. Henderson removed the card, wiped the chip on his sleeve, and inserted it again. The silence at the table was growing thicker. My father Thomas stopped chewing his steak. Destiny lowered her wine glass. Beep, red light, declined. Mr. Henderson repeated, "The code is 05. Do not honor." Hunter stood up, knocking his napkin off his lap. He was starting to sweat now. Tiny beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead. "Give me the machine. You are doing it wrong." He snatched the terminal from the manager's hand. He jammed the card in himself. He stared at the screen, willing it to work. He tapped the enter button aggressively. Processing, the screen read. Then after 3 agonizing seconds, the message changed. "Refer to issuer. Pickup card." Hunter stared at the words, unable to comprehend them. Pickup card. What does that mean? "It means," Mr. Henderson said, taking the machine and the card back from Hunter's trembling hands, that the primary account holder has reported this card as compromised and has ordered the bank to seize it. This card is now the property of the bank, and I am instructed to destroy it." "Destroy it!" Hunter shouted. "You cannot destroy my card. That is my card, mister." Henderson calmly took a pair of scissors from his pocket and cut the black metal card in half. The sound of the metal snapping echoed in the silent room. He dropped the pieces onto the white tablecloth next to the half-eaten lobster. Now Mr. Henderson continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. "We have a problem, Mr. Wilson. You have consumed $45,320 worth of food, alcohol, and venue rental. We have also prepared the next round of champagne you ordered. Since the primary funding source has been revoked, I need another form of payment. Immediately, or I will have to escort you out." Hunter looked around the room. The guests at the nearby tables were staring. The whispers were starting again, louder this time. "Is he broke? Did his card get declined? I thought he was rich." Hunter patted his pockets frantically. He pulled out a worn leather wallet. He dug through it, bypassing the empty slots where credit cards should be. He pulled out a blue debit card from a local credit union. "Here," he said, his voice cracking. "Use this. It is my business account. It has plenty." Mr. Henderson took the debit card. He swiped it. Hunter held his breath. Destiny grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his suit jacket. The machine whirred. Then it made a low buzzing sound. "Insufficient funds," Mr. Henderson read aloud. Hunter's face turned a pale, sickly shade of gray. "No, that's wrong. I transferred money yesterday. I have investors." "Sir, the balance available is $42, Mr. Henderson said. "That covers exactly one glass of the champagne you are drinking. You still owe $45,278. The manager stepped closer, invading Hunter's personal space. "Listen to me closely. This is a 5-star establishment, not a cafeteria. You have 5 minutes to produce a valid payment method. If you do not, I have the police on speed dial. Theft of services is a felony at this amount. You will be arrested in front of everyone you know." Police Destiny squeaked. She turned to her husband. "Hunter, do something. Fix this. Why are your cards not working?" Hunter looked at his wife, panic in his eyes. He realized the game was up. He turned to the only other people he thought could save him. He turned to my parents. "Mom." Dad, Hunter stammered, addressing my parents. "Look, it is a banking error. The system is down. Can you cover it? Just for tonight, I will wire you the money first thing in the morning. Double. I will wire you double." Lucinda and Thomas froze. They were sitting there in their expensive clothes, pretending to be royalty. But the truth was, they were just as broke as Hunter. They lived paycheck to paycheck, relying on my secret subsidies to maintain their lifestyle. Lucinda opened her clutch purse. Her hands were shaking. She stared into the empty bag. She had a credit card, but she knew it was maxed out from buying the dress she was wearing. I don't have that kind of limit, Hunter," Lucinda whispered, her voice trembling. "We thought you were paying. You said Technova was sponsoring this." "I am," Hunter yelled, losing his composure. "But my assets are frozen." "Dad, Thomas, you have the church fund, right? Use the church card." Reverend Thomas turned purple. "I cannot use the church card for a party, you fool. That is embezzlement. Besides, the fund is tied up." Tied up meant empty. Tied up meant Thomas had already spent it on his new Cadillac. "So none of you have money?" Mr. Henderson asked, raising an eyebrow. The silence was the answer. The 4 of them, the Golden family, sat there stripped of their pretenses. They were surrounded by luxury they couldn't afford, eating food they couldn't pay for, and wearing clothes that belonged to a life that wasn't theirs. Mr. Henderson signaled to the security guards. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the room, his voice booming, "I apologize for the interruption. But this party is officially over. The hosts are unable to fulfill their financial obligations. Please vacate the ballroom immediately. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Chairs scraped against the floor as 200 guests stood up at once. The humiliation was total. It was absolute. Hunter slumped into his chair, putting his head in his hands. Destiny began to sob, mascara running down her face. Mr. Henderson looked down at Hunter. "You are not going anywhere, Mr. Wilson. The police are on their way. And you two," he pointed at my parents, "you will need to stay as well. We need to discuss how you are going to pay for the lobster you just ate." In the chaos, no one noticed that the black box I had left earlier was gone. One of the busboys had kicked it under the table. But they didn't need to open it anymore. The lesson inside had already begun. The freeloader had stopped paying and their world was crumbling exactly 15 minutes later. While the orchestra played a melancholic waltz in the empty ballroom, my family was huddled inside the executive restroom near the kitchen entrance. It was a space designed for luxury, with marble floors, gold-plated faucets, and thick linen towels. But at that moment, it smelled like panic and expensive cologne. Hunter was pacing back and forth in front of the mirrors, his face a mask of sweat and terror. Destiny was reapplying her lipstick with trembling hands, trying to maintain the facade of a trophy wife even as her world crumbled. My parents. Reverend Thomas and Lucinda were standing by the door, blocking it as if the police were already outside. "This is a mistake," Hunter stammered, splashing water on his face. "It is a banking glitch. The servers are down. I read about this on Twitter. Technova's assets are just temporarily frozen because of security protocols." Lucinda was not listening to him anymore. Her survival instinct had kicked in. She knew that they were facing a bill of nearly $50,000, and between the four of them, they couldn't even afford a cab ride home. In her mind, there was only one person to blame. Not the son-in-law who had lied for years, not her own greed, but the daughter she had just kicked out. "It is Sasha." Lucinda hissed, her eyes narrowing. "She did something. I saw her on her phone right before she left. She must have called the bank and reported the card stolen." "But it is my card!" Hunter yelled, though his voice cracked. "Is it?" Thomas asked, looking at Hunter with a sudden dawning suspicion. "Is it really your card, son? Or is it one of those authorized user cards you told us about?" "It doesn't matter," Hunter deflected. "Sasha is jealous. She wants to ruin this night because she is miserable. She probably hacked the account. She works with computers, right? Data entry or whatever. She hacked me." Lucinda grabbed her phone. Her long, acrylic nails clicked furiously against the screen as she dialed my number. She put it on speakerphone and held it up like a weapon. Meanwhile, I was cruising down Peachtree Street. The city lights of Atlanta blurred past my windows. The humidity of the night felt heavy, but inside my car, everything was cool and calm. I watched the phone screen light up on my dashboard. Mom calling. I let it ring 3 times, savoring the anticipation. I knew exactly where they were. I knew exactly how desperate they felt. I tapped the answer button. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice smooth and unbothered. "Fix it," Lucinda screamed before I could even finish the word. "Fix it right now, Sasha." I merged onto the highway, heading toward the skyline. "Fix what I asked," feigning innocence. "Don't play dumb with me, you little witch," Lucinda shrieked. The card, Hunter's black card, it was declined. The manager cut it in half. "What did you do? Did you report it? Lost just to embarrass your sister?" I let out a soft laugh. It was a genuine laugh. The absurdity of their delusion was almost impressive. "I didn't report it lost, Mom," I said calmly. "I reported it closed. Because I closed the account." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear Hunter breathing heavily in the background. "What are you talking about?" Hunter shouted near the phone. "You can't close my account. I am the CEO." "Hunter, shut up," I said. My voice was no longer the voice of the submissive daughter. It was the voice of the corporate liquidator. You are not a CEO. You are an unemployed gambler. And that American Express Centurion card, it is not yours. It never was. Liar, Destiny yelled. I bought my Porsche with that card. Yes, I said, you did. And who do you think paid the bill every month? Destiny, did you ever see a bank statement? Did you ever wonder why the bills never came to your house? Because Hunter handles the finances. Destiny cried out, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. I handle the finances, I corrected her. Every dinner, every vacation, every designer bag. That card is a supplementary card linked to my primary business account, the Sasha Banks Holdings account. I have been paying for your lives for 3 years. Silence. Absolute stunned silence filled the bathroom on the other end of the line. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of my tires on the asphalt. Then the denial set in. The psychological barrier that protected their egos was too thick to be broken by simple facts. They couldn't accept that the daughter they despised was the source of their survival. It would mean admitting they were wrong. It would mean admitting I was superior. And that was impossible. You are lying, Lucinda spat, her voice dripping with disdain. You make $12 an hour, Sasha. You drive a Honda. You live in a basement. You are just trying to take credit for Hunter's success because you are jealous. You probably called the bank and pretended to be his wife. That is identity theft, I sighed. I am driving a Honda because I am smart with money, unlike you. And I am driving it to my penthouse at the St. Regis, not a basement. But believe what you want. Reverend Thomas finally spoke. His voice boomed through the speaker using the tone he reserved for scolding sinners in his congregation. Sasha Marie Banks, that is enough. I do not know what game you are playing, but it ends now. We are your parents. We are God's anointed. You are embarrassing us. Now, I am going to give you one chance to redeem yourself. I rolled my eyes. The audacity was breathtaking. Turn that car around, Thomas commanded. Come back here. Put down a valid credit card. Apologize to Hunter for causing this scene, and maybe, just maybe, we will let you sit at the table for dessert. Do not make me tell the church about your wickedness. I listened to his words. I listened to the arrogance of a man who was moments away from being arrested for theft of services. He truly believed he still held power over me. He thought the threat of exclusion was a weapon, not realizing I had already walked out of the prison he built. Are you finished? I asked. Come back here now, Sasha Thomas yelled. Or you are no longer my daughter. I smiled. A cold, hard smile. Dad, I said softly, I haven't been your daughter for a long time. I have just been your ATM. And the machine is out of order. But, Lucinda started to protest. Goodbye, I said. And good luck with the police. They take credit card fraud very seriously. I pressed the red button on my steering wheel. The call ended. The silence in the car was sweet. I was not done yet. I picked up my phone again. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Mr. Henderson, Ritz-Carlton GM. I tapped out a text message. My fingers flew across the screen. Mr. Henderson, I wrote, the individuals in the bathroom are not authorized to use any of my accounts. They have no means to pay. Please proceed with standard protocol for theft of services. Do not show leniency. Press charges if necessary. It is the only way they will learn. I hit send. I watched the message status change from delivered to read. A moment later, 3 dots appeared. Then a simple reply. Understood, Ms. Banks. Security is moving in. I put the phone down and turned up the music. Jay-Z's The Story of O.J. filled the car. Back at the hotel, the bathroom door was about to be kicked open. My family was still in there arguing, blaming me, convinced that if they just yelled loud enough, reality would bend to their will. They were wrong. Reality had just arrived, and it was wearing a security uniform and carrying handcuffs. The illusion was over. The nightmare had begun. And I was driving straight toward the best night of sleep I had had in 10 years. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the St. Regis residences was the first moment of peace I had experienced all day. The doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing not a hallway, but the private foyer of my penthouse. I stepped onto the heated limestone floors and kicked off my heels. I walked into the living room where the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline. Down there, amidst the humidity and the noise, my family was currently imploding. Up here, the air was cool, scented with white tea and thyme, and the only sound was the hum of the Sub-Zero wine fridge. I walked over to the wet bar and poured a glass of sparkling water. I caught my reflection in the glass. For the first time that night, I did not see the hunch-shouldered, apologetic woman I pretended to be. I saw the real Sasha Banks. My family thought I did data entry. They thought I was a low-level clerk who spent her days typing numbers into spreadsheets for $12 an hour. It was a convenient lie. It allowed them to pity me. It allowed them to feel superior. And most importantly, it stopped them from asking for even more money than they already stole. In reality, I am a liquidator. I work for a private equity firm that specializes in distressed assets. When a company is failing, when the CEO has embezzled the funds or the market has crashed, they call me. I am the one who walks in, looks at the books, and decides who gets fired and what gets sold. I have dissolved tech startups, stripped manufacturing plants, and restructured international conglomerates. My commission on a single deal is more than my father makes in 10 years of preaching. I am ruthless. I am efficient. And I am ghost. I walked over to the window and looked down at the city lights. Somewhere down there in a suburban house with a manicured lawn was the home my parents were so proud of. My mind drifted back 10 years. The flashback was vivid, stinging like a fresh cut. I was 24, fresh out of my MBA program, having just landed my first major contract. My parents had called me in a panic. The church was struggling, and the bank was foreclosing on their home. I remembered sitting in that stuffy bank office. My father, Reverend Thomas, was sweating through his suit. He was terrified, not just of losing the house, but of the shame. What would the congregation say? How could a man of God be evicted? I had looked at the bank manager, then at my father. I had the money. I had just closed a deal worth $500,000. I will buy it, I had said. My father had looked at me shocked. You! With what money? I have savings. Dad, I had lied. I had been saving since I was 16. I bought the house that day. I paid off the arrears and put the deed in my name. But then my father had grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, desperate. Sasha, he had whispered, we cannot tell people you bought it. It would look weak. A father should provide for his children, not the other way around. Let us say God provided a miracle. Let us say the bank extended the loan because of my good standing. I had looked into his eyes. I saw his fragile ego hanging by a thread. I loved him then. Or I thought I did. So I agreed. Fine, Dad. It is your house. I am just the invisible investor. For 10 years I let him play the lord of the manor. I let him brag about his property value. I let him scold me for not owning real estate while I held the deed to his bedroom in my safe deposit box. I paid the property tax. I paid the insurance. And he treated me like a tenant who was late on rent. I took a sip of water, the bubbles sharp against my tongue. But the house was not the only secret I was keeping. My thoughts turned to Hunter, the arrogant, loud-mouthed brother-in-law who had called me a freeloader tonight. The irony was so rich it was almost suffocating. 3 years ago, Destiny had come to me crying. Hunter had lost his job at a marketing firm. He had tried to trade crypto and lost their savings. Destiny was pregnant and she was terrified of the humiliation. She begged me to help, but she made me promise not to tell Mom and Dad. She needed Hunter to look successful. So I made a deal with the devil. I created a shell company. I hired Hunter as a consultant. I paid him a salary of $8,000 a month to do absolutely nothing. He sent me reports that I never read. He thought he was a genius strategist. In reality, he was on adult welfare and I was the state. Every suit he wore I paid for. Every time he took Destiny out to dinner and posted it on Instagram with the hashtag #BossLife, I was the one footing the bill. And tonight he had stood up in front of 200 people and mocked me for being poor. He had bitten the hand that fed him, not realizing that hand was the only thing keeping him from the unemployment line. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just greed, it was the lack of respect. They took my money, my sacrifice, my silence, and they weaponized it against me. They built their self-esteem on my back, using me as the stepstool to reach their pedestal. A soft buzzing sound broke my reverie. My phone was vibrating on the marble kitchen island. I walked over and picked it up. It was not my mother. It was not Destiny. It was a number labeled Marcus, executive assistant. I swiped right. Ms. Banks. Marcus's voice was crisp and professional. I apologize for the late hour. I am just confirming the instructions you sent via text. Go ahead, Marcus, I said. We have successfully frozen the primary Amex Centurion account. We have also placed a hold on the supplementary cards issued to Hunter Wilson and Destiny Wilson. The notification has been sent to the credit bureaus. Their scores will drop approximately 150 points by morning due to the sudden closure of a high-limit account. Good, I said. What about the vehicle? The Range Rover and the Porsche are both leased under your holding company, Marcus continued. I have contacted the repossession agency. They have located the Porsche at the Ritz-Carlton Valet. The Range Rover is parked at the residence on Elm Street. Drivers are en route. They should be secured within the hour. Excellent. And the house, I have drafted the eviction notice as per the state laws regarding owner-occupied properties with non-paying tenants. Since there is no formal lease agreement and no rent has been paid in over 60 days, we are filing for immediate removal. The sheriff's department has been notified to serve the papers at 9 a.m. tomorrow. There was a pause. Marcus, who had been with me for 5 years and knew my family history, broke his professional demeanor for a second. Ms. Banks, are you sure this is extensive? I looked out the window again. I imagined Hunter trying to pay for a cab with a declined debit card. I imagined my mother's face when she realized the party was over. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Marcus, I said. They called me a freeloader. I am just proving them right. If I am a freeloader, then I certainly can't afford to pay for their lives anymore. Understood, Marcus said. I will execute everything immediately. Have a good evening, Ms. Banks. The line went dead. I set the phone down. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a battlefield after the general has given the order to fire. The missiles were in the air. The impact was inevitable. I walked into my bedroom, which was larger than my parents' entire ground floor. I opened my walk-in closet. I pushed aside the rack of plain, boring clothes I wore to family gatherings, the costumes of the poor relation. I ran my hand over the silk and cashmere of my real wardrobe. Tomorrow, I would not wear black. Tomorrow, when the sheriff arrived, I would wear red. I went to the bathroom and started the water for a bath. I poured in expensive bath salts. I watched the steam rise. For 10 years, I had been holding my breath, trying to be small enough to fit into their box. Tonight, I had exploded the box. I slipped into the water and closed my eyes. The water was warm. The city was bright. And the freeloader was finally free. The sun rose over Atlanta with a cruel brightness that morning, exposing everything that the night usually hid. At 9 a.m., a yellow taxicab pulled up to the curb of the sprawling colonial estate on Elm Street. It was not the black limousine my family was used to. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and pine air freshener. The back door opened and out stepped the remnants of the Banks dynasty. My mother Lucinda looked 10 years older than she had the night before. Her wig was slightly askew and her earlobes were bare. The 3-carat diamond earrings she never left the house without were currently sitting in a safe at the Ritz-Carlton, held as collateral against a $45,000 debt. My father, Reverend Thomas, climbed out next. His wrist felt light. His gold Rolex, the one he preached about as a sign of God's favor, was also gone, left behind on a velvet tray in the manager's office. Hunter and Destiny dragged themselves out of the back seat. They looked like refugees from a failed gala. Destiny was still wearing her red evening gown, but the hem was stained with dirt from standing on the curb, waiting for a cab they could barely afford. Hunter looked pale, his eyes darting around nervously, as if he expected a SWAT team to jump out of the bushes. They walked up the long paved driveway toward the house that stood as the symbol of their success. The brick facade was imposing, the lawn was perfectly manicured, and the white pillars on the porch gleamed in the sunlight. To them, this structure was their fortress. It was the one place where they were still in charge, the one place where they could lock the door and pretend the world hadn't just rejected them. Thomas marched up the steps first, fishing his keys out of his pocket. He was mumbling to himself, rehearsing the sermon he would give me when I finally crawled back to apologize. He jammed his key into the front door lock and turned it. Nothing happened. He frowned and jiggled the key. He pulled it out, looked at it, and shoved it back in. He turned it harder this time, putting his shoulder into the wood. "It is stuck," Thomas grunted. "Lucinda, give me your key. This one is bent." Lucinda sighed, digging through her purse. She handed him her key. Thomas tried again. It slid into the cylinder, but it refused to turn. It was as if the lock had rejected the key entirely. "What is going on?" Destiny whined, hugging her arms around herself. "I am cold, Daddy. Open the door." "I am trying," Thomas yelled, kicking the bottom of the door. "The lock is broken. We have to call a locksmith. Of all the days for this to happen." He raised his fist to pound on the door, intending to wake up the housekeeper. But before his knuckles could make contact, the heavy oak door swung open from the inside. Thomas stumbled forward, almost losing his balance. He looked up, expecting to see Mrs. Higgins, the elderly housekeeper. Instead, he was staring into the chest of a man who was 6'5" and wide as a refrigerator. The man was wearing a black tactical uniform with the word "Security" embroidered in gold on the pocket. He wore an earpiece and looked at my father with zero emotion. "Who are you?" Thomas demanded, stepping back. "What are you doing in my house? Where is Mrs. Higgins?" The guard didn't answer. He simply stepped aside, opening the path into the foyer. From the hallway, my family could see straight into the formal living room. And there I was. I was sitting in my father's favorite leather armchair, the high-backed wing chair he called his throne. I was not wearing the black suit from the night before. I was wearing a crisp white silk blouse and tailored trousers. My hair was down. I held a porcelain teacup in one hand. Behind me stood two men in sharp gray suits. They held briefcases and looked like the kind of lawyers who charge $1,000 an hour just to breathe your air. Sasha Lucinda gasped, stepping into the foyer. "What are you doing here? And who are these people? Why is there a bouncer at our door?" I took a slow sip of tea, Earl Grey hot. I set the cup down on the saucer with a deliberate clink. "Welcome home," I said softly. "I hope the cab ride wasn't too bumpy." Lucinda's shock instantly morphed into that familiar blinding rage. She saw me sitting in her house drinking her tea, looking like I owned the place, and something in her snapped. She forgot about the guard. She forgot about the lawyers. She only saw the daughter she had humiliated 12 hours ago. "You little witch," Lucinda screamed, dropping her purse. "You changed the locks. You locked us out of our own house. How dare you get out? Get out right now!" She lunged at me. Her hands were clawed, ready to scratch the smile off my face. She crossed the Persian rug in 3 strides, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. But she never reached me. The security guard moved with terrifying speed. He stepped in front of Lucinda, putting up a single hand. He didn't push her. He just created a wall that she bounced off of. "Ma'am, step back," the guard said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Do not touch Miss Banks." Lucinda stumbled back, panting. She looked at the guard, then at Thomas. "Thomas, do something." This man assaulted me. Call the police. Actually, one of the lawyers spoke up. He was a tall man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. We have already notified the police of a potential disturbance. They are on standby, but I would advise you to lower your voice, Mrs. Banks. You are technically trespassing. Trespassing! Thomas roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. This is my house. I built this life. I bought this house 10 years ago. My name is on the mailbox. Is it? I asked. I stood up slowly. I walked around the coffee table. On the center of the table sat the object that had started it all. The black gift box. It was a bit battered from being thrown on the floor at the Ritz-Carlton. One corner was dented, but it was still intact. I had retrieved it from the hotel manager before I left. It was too important to leave behind. You didn't want to open your gift last night, I said, trailing my finger over the lid. You said it was trash. You said it was paper. But you really should have looked closer. I picked up the box and held it out to my father. Take it, Dad. Open it. Read the paper you threw away. Thomas looked at the box like it was a bomb. He looked at me, then at the lawyers, then back at the box. His hands were shaking not from anger this time, but from a creeping, cold dread. He snatched the box from my hand. He ripped the lid off. He pulled out the top document. I watched his eyes scan the page. I watched him read the words, warranty deed. I watched him look for his name and fail to find it. I watched him find my name instead. Sasha Marie Banks, owner. Date of purchase, October 14th, 2014. That is a forgery, Thomas whispered, looking up at me with wet, fearful eyes. This is fake. You printed this off the internet. Show him the next one, Mr. Sterling, I said to the lawyer. The silver-haired lawyer stepped forward and opened a file folder. He pulled out a thick stack of bank statements. Mr. Banks, the lawyer said smoothly, these are the mortgage payment records for the last 120 months. As you can see, every single payment was made from an account held by Sasha Banks Holdings, LLC. You have never paid a dime of principal or interest on this property. You are listed as a tenant at sufferance. Tenant. Lucinda shrieked. She snatched the paper from Thomas. That is a lie. We are the owners. We let her pay rent to live in the basement. No, Mom, I said, my voice hard as granite. You don't let me do anything. I let you live upstairs. I let you pretend to be rich. I let you drive cars I paid for. I let you eat food I bought. I turned my gaze to Hunter. He was standing by the door trying to make himself invisible. He hadn't said a word since they walked in. He was staring at the lawyers, and I could see the sweat dripping down his temple. He knew. Unlike my parents who were blinded by ego, Hunter was a con artist. He recognized a legal ambush when he saw one. He knew that the men in suits weren't actors. He knew that the documents were real. And he knew exactly what came next. Hunter, I said. You look nervous. Hunter swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. Sasha, look. He started, his voice a pathetic squeak. We can talk about this. Family disputes shouldn't involve lawyers. Let's just calm down. It is too late for calm, I said. I nodded to the security guard. He reached behind the sofa and pulled out 4 large, heavy-duty plastic bins. He tossed them onto the floor at my family's feet. They clattered loudly, echoing in the silent house. You have 1 hour, I announced. 1 hour for what? Destiny asked, her voice trembling. To pack, I said. You can take your clothes. You can take your personal toiletries. You can take photos. But the furniture stays. The electronics stay. The art stays. Anything that was purchased with my credit cards remains in this house as my property. You can't do this, Lucinda screamed, realizing the nightmare was real. You can't kick your own mother out on the street. It is illegal. Actually, the lawyer interjected again, since you have never signed a lease and have never paid rent and given the explicit threats of violence made against the owner, which we have on recording from last night's voicemail, Ms. Banks has been granted an emergency order for immediate removal. The sheriff is meeting us here in exactly. He checked his watch 45 minutes to oversee the final lockout. I suggest you start packing. The room spun. My father collapsed onto the sofa. My mother stood frozen, her mouth open in a silent scream. Destiny began to cry, a high-pitched wail of a child who has lost her toy. But Hunter didn't cry. He looked at the plastic bin at his feet. He looked at me. And for the first time in his life, he looked at me with fear. He realized that the freeloader wasn't just cutting them off. I was erasing them. The clock is ticking, I said, checking my own watch. A Cartier tank watch I had finally taken out of the safe. 59 minutes left. I suggest you hurry. I have a cleaning crew coming at noon, and they throw everything left behind into the dumpster. I sat back down in the leather chair and picked up my tea. Start packing. The silence in the living room was so profound that I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. It was a rhythmic, mocking sound counting down the seconds of their denial. My father, Reverend Thomas, held the warranty deed in his trembling hands. His eyes, usually so full of judgment and fire when he stood at the pulpit, were now wide with the desperate confusion of a man watching his reality dissolve. He traced the embossed seal of the county clerk. He traced the date. And then his finger stopped on the line that mattered most, the line that listed the grantee. It did not say Thomas and Lucinda Banks. It said Sasha Marie Banks. That is impossible, Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible. We signed the papers. I remember signing the papers in the bank manager's office. You were just the co-signer, Sasha. You were just the guarantor. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. No, Dad. You signed the occupancy agreement. You signed a document acknowledging that you were allowed to reside in the property at the owner's discretion. You were too busy bragging about God's favor to actually read the fine print, weren't you? You assumed that because you are the patriarch, you automatically owned everything I paid for. Lucinda snatched the paper from him. She held it close to her face, squinting without her reading glasses. This is a trick, she spat. You forged this. You are trying to steal our home. It is not your home, Mother, I said, my voice dropping to a register that was dangerously low. It is a building. A building that I bought with my bonus from the liquidation of a steel mill in Pittsburgh 10 years ago. I bought the bricks. I bought the mortar. I bought the roof that has kept you dry while you called me a failure. I stood up and walked over to the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a massive oil painting of my parents commissioned 3 years ago. You see, I continued, turning back to face them. Home implies safety. Home implies family. But this place... For me, this has never been a home. It has been a hotel where the staff treats the paying guest like a servant. And the thing about hotels, Mom, is that the management reserves the right to refuse service to anyone. I walked back to the coffee table and tapped the second file folder, the one labeled Financial Summary, 2014 to 2024. You called me a freeloader, I said. That word has been ringing in my ears all night. Freeloader. Someone who takes without giving. Someone who exploits the generosity of others. I flipped the folder open. Inside was not a single sheet of paper, but a thick-bound report. It looked like a corporate audit, because that is exactly what it was. I had my forensic accounting team compile it last night while you were sleeping in my house. I picked up the report. Let us look at the receipts, shall we? I asked. If I am the freeloader, then surely this ledger will show 0 contributions from me. Surely it will show that Hunter and Dad have been carrying the weight of this family. I turned to the first tab marked Destiny. Item 1 I read aloud. The Dream Wedding at the Botanical Gardens. June 2021. Cost of venue $30,000. Catering $25,000. Custom Vera Wang dress $12,000. Flowers imported from Holland $15,000. I looked up at Destiny. She was weeping silently, mascara running down her cheeks. Total cost for the day you became Mrs. Wilson, $120,000, I stated clearly. Who paid that? Destiny. Did Hunter pay it? Destiny looked at her husband. Hunter looked at the floor. Hunter said his trust fund matured. She sobbed. Hunter doesn't have a trust fund, I said. Hunter has a gambling addiction. Which brings me to item 2. I flipped the page. The sound of the paper turning was sharp and loud. Item 2. Angel investment in Tech Nova. Startup, I read. Date August 2022. Amount $50,000. I looked at Hunter. He flinched as if I had hit him. You told the family you needed seed money for a revolutionary app, I said. You came to me begging. You said you would pay me back with interest in 6 months. Do you want to know where that money went? I pulled out a sub-report from the file. It was a transaction history from the MGM Grand Casino in Las Vegas and an online sports betting site. It went to the roulette wheel, Hunter, I said. You lost $50,000 in 3 weekends. You didn't build an app. You built a deficit. And who covered your rent that month so Destiny wouldn't find out? The freeloader did. Destiny gasped. She turned to Hunter and began hitting his chest with her weak fists. You gambled it. You told me the market crashed. You told me we lost the funding because of the economy. I ignored their domestic dispute and turned to the next tab. This one was marked Lucinda. My mother stiffened. She crossed her arms trying to look defiant, but her eyes were terrified. Item 3, I read. The Image Maintenance Fund. This includes the monthly stipend I transfer to your personal checking account, Mom. $3,000 a month, every month, for 10 years. I looked at the itemized list. Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, the wig specialist in Buckhead. You spent $3,000 a month on clothes to wear to church so you could look better than the other deacons' wives. You spent my money to buy the very outfits you wore while looking down your nose at my plain black suits. I did not know it was your money, Lucinda shouted, her voice shrill. Your father said it was a stipend from the church. I looked at Thomas. He shrank into the sofa cushions. He had been skimming the top off the church funds, yes, but he had used my money to plug the holes so he wouldn't get caught. He had let his wife believe the lie to keep her happy and quiet. And let us not forget the cars. I continued, relentless. The Porsche Macan, the Cadillac Escalade, lease payments, insurance, maintenance, all drafted from Sasha Banks Holdings. I closed the folder with a heavy thud. I looked at the summary page on the back. $1.45 million, I said. The number hung in the air. $1,450,000. That is the exact amount I have poured into this family in the last decade. That is the cost of your lifestyle. That is the price of your dignity. I stepped closer to them. The security guard tensed, ready to intervene, but he didn't need to. They were paralyzed. They were crushed under the weight of the truth. You called me a freeloader because I ate a plate of lobster at a party I paid for? I said, my voice shaking slightly with suppressed rage. You called me a failure because I didn't dress like a peacock. But the truth is, I am the only reason you people aren't living in a shelter. I am the bank. I am the employer. I am the safety net. I looked at Hunter, who was trying to push Destiny away as she clawed at his face. I looked at my parents, who looked small and old and pathetic. And today, the bank is closed, I declared. The safety net is gone. You have exactly $1.45 million worth of audacity, but you don't have a single cent to your names. The silence that followed was total. It was the silence of a vacuum, the silence of an implosion. Thomas looked at the deed in his hand. He looked at the house around him, the crown molding the silk drapes, the crystal chandelier. He realized for the first time that he was a stranger in his own life. He was a guest who had overstayed his welcome by 10 years. I checked my watch again. 30 minutes left, I said. And judging by the look of things, you haven't packed a single sock. I turned to the silver-haired lawyer. Mr. Sterling, if they are not out by the deadline, what is the procedure? Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses. The sheriff will forcibly remove them, Ms. Banks, and anything left inside becomes your property to dispose of as you see fit. I nodded. I hear the dump is lovely this time of year, I said. Destiny wailed. Lucinda sank to her knees, burying her face in her hands. Hunter stared at the wall, seeing his life end. But I felt nothing. No pity, no regret. Just the cold, hard satisfaction of the bottom line. The accounts were finally balanced, and they were in the red. The heavy silence that followed my declaration of the $1.45 million debt was not a peaceful one. It was the suffocating pressure before a bomb detonates. My parents were slumped on the sofa looking like deflated balloons, but I was watching Hunter. I knew men like him. I had fired hundreds of them in my career. They were predators until they met a bigger predator, and then instantly they became scavengers. Hunter was staring at the financial report on the coffee table, calculating his odds. He looked at Thomas and Lucinda, two aging narcissists with zero assets. He looked at Destiny, a pampered princess with no job skills. Then he looked at me. He looked at my suit, my lawyers, and the deed that proved I owned the roof over his head. Hunter took a small step away from Destiny, then another. He straightened his tie, wiped the sweat from his lip, and walked toward me. The arrogant swagger he had displayed at the Ritz-Carlton was gone, replaced by the pathetic posture of a beggar. Sasha, Hunter said, his voice trembling. I think there has been a huge misunderstanding here. A misunderstanding? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You mean when you called me a freeloader? Or when you tried to pay a $45,000 bill with a debit card that had $42 on it? No, Hunter stammered, letting out a breathless laugh. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know it was you. Then he did something that made Destiny gasp. He fell to his knees. It was a theatrical, desperate motion right in front of my chair. Sasha, you have to believe me, he pleaded, reaching out as if to touch my shoe. I was manipulated. It was them. He pointed a shaking finger back at my parents and his wife. They told me you were useless, he said, the words spilling out like vomit. Lucinda told me every day that I was the son she never had. She told me I had to treat you like that to keep the family order. I was just trying to fit in, Sasha. I was just trying to be a good son-in-law. Hunter Destiny screamed, her voice raw and jagged. What are you saying? Hunter didn't even look at her. Shut up, Destiny, he yelled over his shoulder. You don't understand business. You never have. He turned back to me, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Sasha, I have always respected you. I know you are the brains of this operation, but Destiny is expensive. She is demanding. She made me buy that car. She made me throw that party. I wanted to save the money. I am a victim of their greed, just like you. We are on the same side. The room was frozen. Destiny stood there in her stained red gown, the dress I had paid for, staring at the man she had worshipped. She was watching him grovel at the feet of the sister she despised, selling her out for a chance to sleep on a couch. I set my teacup down and stood up slowly. Hunter, I said, you are right about one thing. You are a victim, but not of my family. You are a victim of your own stupidity. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. You see, Hunter, people lie. But data never lies. You said you respected me. You said you defended me. Let us see what the data says. I swiped up on my phone, casting the screen to the massive 80-inch smart TV mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of text messages. I picked up the remote and zoomed in on the first message, dated 2 weeks ago. It was a conversation between Hunter and a contact named Tiffany Sidepiece. I read it aloud. Hunter to Tiffany says, God, I cannot wait to get away from this cow. Destiny is eating me alive. She is so stupid it hurts. She actually thinks my startup is real. I scrolled to the next one. Hunter to Tiffany says her sister Sasha is even worse, the ugly duckling in the basement. I have to be nice to her because she is the one signing the checks, but honestly, looking at her makes me lose my appetite. Just waiting for the old man Thomas to kick the bucket so we can get the house and the life insurance. I turned to look at Hunter. His face was gray. You hacked my phone, he whispered. It is company property, I reminded him. I pay the bill. I own the phone. I own the number. And I own the messages. I turned to Destiny. She was not crying anymore. Her face was a mask of pure shock that was slowly transforming into rage. She looked at the screen. She read the words, cow, stupid, ugly. She read the name Tiffany. Destiny Hunter said, backing away toward the door. Baby, listen. It is fake. She photoshopped it. Destiny took off her high-heel shoe. She held it like a weapon. You called me a cow? She asked, her voice deadly quiet. You spent my sister's money on Tiffany. Baby No Hunter started. Destiny let out a scream that didn't sound human. She launched herself at him. She didn't fight like a lady. She fought like a woman who had lost everything. She swung the heel of her shoe and connected with his shoulder. You liar, Destiny screamed, clawing at his suit jacket. You parasite. You told me you loved me. Hunter shoved her back. Get off me, you crazy witch. Destiny stumbled but came back harder. My mother, Lucinda, finally broke out of her trance. She grabbed her heavy purse and swung it at Hunter's head. You used us, Lucinda shrieked. You ate my food. You slept in my guest room. It was absolute chaos. The Golden family was devouring itself. My father was shouting, trying to separate them, but getting shoved aside. I watched from my chair, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. The facade was gone. The collapse was total. Hunter finally pushed Destiny hard enough that she fell onto the sofa. He stood there panting, his shirt ripped, bleeding from a scratch on his face. He looked at me with pure hatred. You ruined everything, he spat. I pointed to the door. Your girlfriend Tiffany lives in a trailer park on the south side. I suggest you start walking. Hunter turned and ran out the door, slamming it behind him. Destiny lay on the sofa, sobbing into the cushions. The family was destroyed, not by me, but by the truth I had forced them to see. Sunday morning arrived with the heavy, suffocating humidity typical of Atlanta, but the storm brewing inside the Greater Hope Tabernacle was far more dangerous than the weather. While I sat in my penthouse reviewing the final eviction protocols with my legal team, my father, Reverend Thomas, was preparing for the performance of his lifetime. He knew he had lost the legal battle. He knew the house was gone. So he did what narcissists always do when cornered. He weaponized the only asset he had left, his reputation. I opened my iPad and navigated to the church's official Facebook page. The notification bell was already ringing. The service was being live-streamed and the caption read, "A family under attack. Please pray for Pastor Thomas." I clicked the video. The camera angle was low, looking up at the pulpit to make my father look larger than life. He was wearing his purple vestments, the color of royalty and suffering. He was not preaching from the Bible today. He was preaching from a script of pure fabrication. My brothers and sisters. Thomas bellowed, his voice cracking with practiced emotion. I stand before you today with a heavy heart, a broken heart. You know I have served this community for 30 years. You know I have given the shirt off my back to the poor. Amen, the congregation shouted back. But today, Thomas continued, wiping a tear from his eye. I face a trial unlike any other. The devil has entered my own home, not in the form of a stranger, but in the form of my own flesh and blood. My eldest daughter, Sasha, has been seduced by the spirit of greed. I watched as a murmur went through the crowd. She has used legal trickery, he shouted, pounding his fist on the wood. She has used dark loopholes to steal the very roof over her aging parents' heads. She wants to throw your pastor and his sick wife out onto the street. She wants us homeless. She wants us destroyed. The camera panned to the front row. There sat my mother, Lucinda. She was not wearing her usual Sunday best. She was dressed in drab gray, looking frail and small. It was a costume. Just yesterday she had been swinging a designer handbag at Hunter's head with the strength of a prize fighter. Now she looked like she was on death's door. As Thomas reached the crescendo of his sermon, screaming about how sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child, Lucinda played her part. She let out a loud, theatrical gasp. She clutched her chest. She swayed in the pew. Lucinda Thomas yelled, rushing down from the pulpit. My mother collapsed into the arms of the head deacon. It was perfect timing. It was Hollywood quality acting. The live stream comments exploded. I watched them scroll by in real time, a digital lynch mob forming instantly. One user wrote, "Sasha is a demon. How can she do this to a man of God?" Another wrote, "We should find where she works and protest. She needs to be taught a lesson." A third comment appeared. "If I see her in the street, I will spit on her." My phone began to buzz on the table. First it was one text, then 10, then 50. My number had been leaked in the comments. "You are going to hell," one message read. "Watch your back," read another. I sat there sipping my coffee, feeling the temperature in the room drop. They were not just lying. They were inciting violence. They were using the faith of good people to cover up their own theft. My father was not protecting his home. He was protecting the secret that he had embezzled church funds to pay for that home's furnishings. I picked up my phone. I did not block the numbers. I did not reply. I screenshotted every threat. I screen-recorded the sermon where my father claimed he owned the house, a direct contradiction to the sworn affidavit he signed yesterday admitting he was a tenant. Lucinda was now being fanned by the church nurses on the live stream, looking weak and victimized. The donation link pinned to the bottom of the video was climbing. $5,000 raised for the pastor's legal defense fund. They were grifting. Even at rock bottom, they were grifting. I stood up. My lawyer, Mr. Sterling, looked at me with concern. "Ms. Banks," he said, "we should issue a cease and desist for defamation." "No," I said, buttoning my white blazer. "A piece of paper will not stop this. They want a show, Mr. Sterling. They want a villain." I grabbed my purse and the thick file folder containing the forensic audit of the church's accounts. I am going to give them a revelation instead. I walked to the elevator. The time for mercy was over. They had brought the church into our private war. Now I was going to bring the truth to the altar. And unlike my father's sermon, my testimony would be backed by bank routing numbers. The heavy oak doors of the Greater Hope Tabernacle swung open with a groan that cut through the organ music like a gunshot. The entire congregation turned their heads. 500 people who had just been praying for my destruction were now staring at me. I walked down the center aisle. I did not walk with my head down. I did not walk with the shuffle of a repentant sinner coming to the altar for forgiveness. I walked with the rhythmic, terrifying click of stiletto heels on hardwood. I walked like a CEO entering a hostile boardroom. Beside me walked James, my senior forensic accountant. He was a small man with glasses clutching a thick black binder against his chest. To the congregation he looked harmless. To my father he should have looked like the Grim Reaper. Reverend Thomas stood at the pulpit frozen. His hand was raised in mid-benediction. For a split second a smile flickered across his face. He thought I had broken. He thought the pressure of the live stream and the hate comments had forced me to come and beg for his mercy publicly. He lowered his hand and leaned into the microphone. "Praise God," Thomas boomed, his voice dripping with false benevolence. "The prodigal daughter returns. Come, Sasha. Come to the altar. Kneel and ask for forgiveness, and we shall welcome you back." I reached the steps of the pulpit. I did not kneel. I walked right past the kneeling bench and ascended the stairs until I was standing face to face with him. Up close, I could see the sweat trapped in the wrinkles of his forehead. I could smell the fear radiating off him. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He was too stunned to resist. I turned to face the crowd. The silence was absolute. Even the babies in the nursery seemed to stop crying. "I am not here to kneel, Dad," I said. My voice was calm, amplified through the massive speakers. "And I am not here to pray. I am here to audit." A gasp rippled through the pews. Lucinda, who was sitting in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, stopped moving. "You called me greedy," I continued, locking eyes with the camera at the back of the room. "You told these people that I was stealing your home. You asked them to donate their hard-earned money to your legal defense fund." I signaled to James. He stepped forward and opened the black binder. He pulled out a single enlarged document. "But before you donate another cent, I think you should know where your money actually goes." I held up the paper. "This is a bank transfer record from the Greater Hope Tabernacle Youth Outreach Fund," I announced. "This fund was established to buy school supplies and winter coats for orphans." "Amen," a deacon shouted from the amen corner, not realizing the trap. "Amen indeed," I said. On August 14th of last year, a wire transfer of $200,000 was authorized from this restricted charity account. I paused. I let the number hang in the air. $200,000. Did that money go to the orphanage, I asked? Did it go to the soup kitchen numb? I flipped the paper over to show the destination routing number. "It went to Buckhead Luxury Imports," I read clearly, "specifically for the purchase of a Porsche Macan Turbo. A car registered to my sister Destiny Wilson." The silence broke. It shattered. A woman in the choir dropped her hymnal. People stood up. "Lies!" Thomas shouted, trying to grab the microphone back. "She is lying." "That was a church vehicle. For transporting the elderly," I sidestepped him easily. "A church vehicle?" I asked. "A Porsche Macan with red leather interior and a personalized license plate that reads Queen Bee." I pulled out another photo from the binder. It was a picture of Destiny posing on the hood of the car holding a bottle of champagne. "Is this how we transport the elderly now, Dad?" The crowd turned. The energy in the room shifted instantly from reverence to rage. These people were not rich. They were working-class families who gave 10% of their paychecks because they believed in the mission. They realized in that second that they hadn't been giving to God. They had been giving to Destiny's ego. I turned back to my father. He was gripping the pulpit, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You stole from children," I whispered loud enough for the mic to catch. "You stole $200,000 from orphans to buy a toy for your golden child. And then you had the audacity to call me greedy because I stopped paying your bills." I dropped the papers onto the pulpit. They scattered like leaves. "The audit is finished, Reverend," I said. "I suggest you call a lawyer, but not with the church's money. That account is now frozen." I handed the microphone back to him. He didn't take it. It clattered to the floor, a loud thud that signaled the end of his reign. I walked down the steps. The congregation parted for me like the Red Sea. They weren't looking at me with hate anymore. They were looking at Thomas, and the look in their eyes was terrifying. As I walked out the doors, I heard the first shout from the back of the room. "Where is our money, Thomas?" The house of God had just become a courthouse, and the verdict was guilty. The microphone clattered to the floor, rolling away from my father's feet like a dropped baton in a race he had already lost. The feedback squealed for a split second, a sharp piercing noise that made half the congregation flinch, but no one moved to pick it up. All eyes were fixed on the papers scattered across the pulpit. The bank statements, the wire transfers, the undeniable proof that the shepherd had been fleecing his flock to buy a German sports car for his favorite child. I stood there looking at Reverend Thomas. For 30 years, this man had been a giant to these people. He had baptized their children, buried their dead, and taken their tithes with a smile that promised salvation. Now stripped of his lies, he looked small. He looked like exactly what he was. An old man caught with his hand in the cookie jar. But I wasn't done. The exposure was just the opening act. Now came the negotiation. I signaled to James, my forensic accountant. He stepped forward, bypassing the stunned deacons, and placed a single crisp legal document on top of the messy pile of evidence. He also produced a black fountain pen. Thomas stared at the document. He didn't need to read it to know what it was. We had emailed a draft to his attorney 10 minutes ago. "You have a choice, Dad," I said. My voice was not amplified anymore, but in the dead silence of the sanctuary, it carried to the back row. Thomas looked up at me, sweat beading on his upper lip. "Sasha, please." Not here. Let us go to my office. We can discuss this as a family. There is no family anymore. I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. There are only plaintiffs and defendants, and right now you are looking at a federal indictment. I pointed to the document. This is a confession of judgment. I explained loud enough for the front row to hear. It states that you admit to the misappropriation of funds. It states that you acknowledge the debt of $1.45 million owed to Sasha Banks Holdings. And it states that you voluntarily surrender all claims to the property on Elm Street, agreeing to vacate the premises within 24 hours. Thomas shook his head frantically. I cannot sign that. That admits guilt. That ruins me. I leaned in closer. The alternative, Dad, is that James here walks out of those double doors and drives straight to the FBI field office in downtown Atlanta. He has a meeting scheduled with a special agent in financial crimes at 1 p.m. I checked my Cartier watch. It is currently 12:15. You have 45 minutes before he gets in his car. Thomas looked at James. James didn't blink. He just tapped the cover of the black binder, which contained 10 years of embezzlement history. If the FBI gets this binder, I continued, my voice low and lethal, you won't just lose the house. You will lose your freedom. Embezzlement of charitable funds, wire fraud, tax evasion. You are looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. You will die in a cell, Dad. Is the Porsche worth dying in a cell? Thomas began to tremble. His knees gave way and he had to grip the pulpit to stay upright. He looked out at the congregation, hoping for a savior. Hoping for someone to stand up and shout, "Hallelujah, let the man go." But the faces staring back at him were cold. They were the faces of people who worked double shifts to put money in that offering plate. They were the faces of betrayal. Suddenly, a wail broke the silence. It was Lucinda. My mother, who had been play-acting a heart attack just minutes before, suddenly found the strength to rush the altar. She scrambled up the steps, her gray dress flying around her legs. She grabbed my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. Sasha, she screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Sasha, stop this! He is your father. I am your mother. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I didn't pull away immediately. I let her hold on. I wanted to feel the desperation. Kanoi, she reverted to the endearments she used when I was a child, trying to trigger a muscle memory of love. Baby, please. We are old. We have nowhere to go. How can you be so cruel? I gave birth to you. I carried you for 9 months. I nursed you. Doesn't that mean anything? She looked at the crowd, playing to the audience one last time. She is my daughter, she wailed. I gave her life. And now, she wants to kill us. How can you be so evil, Sasha? The emotional weight of her words hung in the air. For a second, I felt the old guilt rising. The conditioning of a lifetime, telling me that honoring my parents was the highest commandment, no matter how abusive they were. But then, I looked at the Porsche receipt on the pulpit. I looked at the eviction notice. I remembered the Freeloader comment. I remembered the 10 years of being their ATM while they treated me like their servant. I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off my arm. I am not evil, Mother, I said. My voice was steady. I was not shouting. I was stating a fact. Lucinda stared at me, her mouth open. And you are not evil either, I continued. You are just greedy. The word echoed off the stained glass windows. Greedy. You are greedy for status, I said. You are greedy for praise. You are greedy for things you did not earn. You traded your relationship with your daughter for a lifestyle you couldn't afford. You sold me out for a luxury car and a country club membership. That is not evil, Mom. That is just pathetic. Lucinda recoiled as if I had slapped her. I turned back to Thomas. Sign the paper, Dad, I ordered. Or James makes the call. Thomas looked at Lucinda. She was sobbing on the floor now, no longer acting, finally feeling the true weight of her loss. He looked at the congregation. A deacon in the second row, a man who had supported him for 20 years, stood up. Sign it, Thomas, the deacon said. His voice was deep and unforgiving. Sign it and get out of our church. That was the final blow. The court of public opinion had delivered its verdict. Thomas reached out with a shaking hand. He picked up the pen. He didn't look at me. He looked at the paper, his eyes watering so much he probably couldn't read the words. But he knew what they meant. They meant the end of the Banks dynasty. He pressed the pen to the paper. His signature, usually so flamboyant and large, came out as a cramped, jagged scrawl. He signed the confession. He signed the eviction agreement. He dropped the pen. "It is done," he whispered. "Are you happy now?" I picked up the document. I checked the signature. It was valid. "I am not happy, Dad," I said, sliding the paper into my folder. "I am just paid in full." I turned to James. "Cancel the meeting with the FBI. For now." I looked at my parents one last time. They were huddled together at the pulpit, surrounded by the debris of their lies. "You have 24 hours, I said. "The clock started when you signed that paper. If you are not out by noon tomorrow, the sheriff executes the writ." And Dad, Thomas, looked up, his eyes broken. "Leave the vestments," I said. "You didn't pay for those either. The church did." I turned and walked down the steps. I walked past the choir stand. I walked past the ushers. I walked out of the double doors into the bright, humid Sunday afternoon. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of the congregation starting to rise, a tidal wave of anger that my parents would have to face alone. I had given them a lifeboat out of prison, but I had left them in the middle of a storm they created. I got into my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Hunter sent 5 minutes ago. "Just saw the live stream. I am leaving town. Don't come for me." I smiled. The rats were scattering. I put the car in drive. I had one more stop to make. The house. I needed to make sure the locks were changed again, and I needed to supervise the packing. I wasn't going to let them steal the copper wiring out of the walls on their way out. The ultimatum had been delivered. The empire had fallen. And tomorrow the freeloader would finally be the queen of her own castle. Monday morning arrived not with the singing of birds, but with the aggressive sound of packing tape ripping off the dispenser. At 9 a.m. sharp, a fleet of 3 moving trucks pulled into the driveway. They were not there to help my family move to a new luxury estate. They were there to repossess the inventory of a failed business venture. And that business was the Banks family image. I stood in the center of the foyer holding a clipboard. I was no longer the daughter or the sister. I was the liquidator. I wore comfortable loafers and jeans because today was a work day. My family stood huddled in the corner by the staircase. They watched with hollow eyes as a team of 6 professional movers marched through the front door. I pointed to the living room. "Everything in that room goes," I instructed the foreman. "The Chesterfield leather sofa, the Persian rug, the 85-inch television. Pack it all." "But that is my chair," Thomas protested weakly. He was sitting on a folding chair we had found in the garage, the only seat left for him. I watched the news in that chair. I looked at the receipt clipped to my clipboard. Item 402, vintage leather wingback chair, purchased November 2018, price $4,000. Payment method, Sasha Banks Amex Platinum. I shook my head. "No, Dad, that is my chair. You just sat in it. Take it away." 2 movers hoisted the massive chair effortlessly. Thomas watched his throne disappear out the front door. In the dining room, Lucinda was trying to hide a set of crystal wine glasses in her purse. "Empty the bag, Mom," I said from the doorway. Lucinda froze. "These are Waterford," she whispered. "They were a gift." "Yes, a gift from me for Christmas 3 years ago," I corrected her. "And since you threw my gift on the floor on Saturday, I am revoking all prior gifts. Put them back." She trembled as she placed the glasses back on the table. The movers swooped in, wrapping them in bubble wrap with efficient speed. But the real battle was happening in the master bedroom. I walked upstairs to find Destiny frantically stuffing designer handbags into a black garbage bag. She looked like a looting victim in reverse. She was trying to salvage the symbols of her status. "Destiny, stop," I said, leaning against the doorframe. She clutched a Chanel Classic flat bag to her chest. No, you can't have this one. Hunter gave this to me for my birthday. He paid for it. I walked over and gently took the bag from her grip. I opened the interior pocket and pulled out the authenticity card. I checked the serial number against my database on my iPad. Purchased at Chanel Lenox Square, May 12th, I read. Payment method ending in 1004. That is my card, Destiny. Hunter didn't buy this. I did. He just swiped the card I gave him. I tossed the bag into the open crate the movers had brought. No! Destiny screamed, diving for the crate. Please, Sasha. It is the only thing I have left. People will think I am poor without it. You are poor. Destiny, I said, blocking her path. That is the reality. You have no job, you have no husband, and now you have no bag. I pointed to a small pile of items on the bed. That is what you keep, I said. She looked at the pile. It consisted of a few fast fashion dresses from before she met Hunter, some old paperbacks and a teddy bear she had since childhood. Anything that was purchased with your own money, you keep, I explained. Anything purchased with mine is being liquidated to recoup a fraction of my losses. We went room by room. It was surgical. The movers stripped the silk drapes. They disconnected the surround sound system. They rolled up the carpets. They even took the espresso machine from the kitchen counter. By 11 a.m., the house was unrecognizable. The warm, inviting home that my parents had bragged about for a decade was gone. What remained was a shell. The walls were bare, showing the pale squares where art had hung. The floors echoed with every step. The air felt colder, sharper. My parents and sister stood in the empty living room. Beside them were 3 suitcases and 4 cardboard boxes. That was it. That was the sum total of their lives without my funding. Lucinda looked around the empty room. Her voice echoed when she spoke. It is so cold in here. It is not cold, Mom, I said, marking the final item off my checklist. It is just empty. It is exactly what this relationship has been for 10 years. A beautiful facade with nothing inside. I signaled the foreman. Load the last truck. I looked at my family. They looked small against the vast, empty white walls. You have 1 hour to call a cab, I said. Or you can walk. But you cannot stay here. I walked out the front door, leaving them standing in the echo of their own greed. The house was finally clean. And for the first time, the silence inside wasn't heavy. It was weightless. While the movers were loading the last of the furniture into the trucks, Hunter decided it was time to cut his losses. He had been standing by the garage door, watching his life dissolve into cardboard boxes, and I could see the panic rising in his eyes. He realized that once the sheriff arrived to formally lock the property, he would be stuck on the street with a wife he hated and in-laws he despised. He patted his pocket, checking for the keys to the Range Rover. It was the only asset left that he thought he could control. He didn't know that I had already remotely disabled the ignition via the tracking app, but he was about to find out the hard way. Hunter made a break for it. He didn't say goodbye to Destiny. He didn't offer to help my parents with their suitcases. He just sprinted across the driveway toward the black SUV, pulling the keys out as he ran. Destiny looked up from her pile of clothes, confused. "Hunter," she called out. "Where are you going?" "Wait for me." Hunter ignored her. He reached the car and yanked the handle. The door opened. He jumped in and slammed it shut, locking it instantly. He was going to leave them. He was going to drive away and never look back. But as he pressed the start button, nothing happened. The engine didn't roar to life. The dashboard remained dark. He pressed it again frantically. Nothing. Then the silence of the cul-de-sac was shattered, not by an engine, but by sirens. 3 police cruisers swerved into the driveway, blocking the exit. Blue and red lights flashed against the white columns of the house, creating a dizzying strobe effect. Hunter froze behind the wheel. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw 2 officers stepping out with their guns drawn. "Step out of the vehicle," the officer shouted over the loudspeaker. "Put your hands where I can see them," Destiny screamed. My mother clutched her chest. My father looked like he was about to faint. They thought the police were there for the eviction. They were wrong. The police were there for Hunter. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. I had spent the previous night compiling a dossier not just on my family's spending, but on Hunter's illegal activities. The $50,000 he stole wasn't just gambling money. It was wire fraud. He had forged my signature on a loan application 3 months ago, and I had sent the documents to the fraud division at 9 a.m. Hunter slowly opened the car door. He stepped out trembling. He raised his hands. Officers rushed him, spinning him around and slamming him against the hood of the car he pretended to own. "You are under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny," the officer announced as he snapped the handcuffs on Hunter's wrists. The metallic click of the cuffs echoed louder than any scream. Hunter twisted his head around, searching for someone to blame. "Sasha," he yelled, his face pressed against the cold metal of the car. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You gave me permission." Destiny watched in horror as her husband was dragged toward the patrol car. She realized in that moment that everything was a lie. The tech company, the millions, the love, it was all smoke. She had married a criminal who tried to abandon her the moment things got tough. "You set me up," Hunter screamed as they shoved him into the back seat. "You witch! You planned this!" I looked at him through the window of the police car. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just gave a small, indifferent shrug. "You played a game you didn't understand, Hunter," I said softly, though he couldn't hear me. "And now you have lost." The police car pulled away, leaving Destiny standing in the driveway completely alone. She had no husband. She had no money. She had no car. She looked at me, begging for a sister's mercy, but all she saw was the liquidator closing the file. As the police sirens faded into the distance, the sky finally broke. It started as a slow drizzle dotting the pavement, but within minutes it turned into a torrential downpour. It was as if the heavens agreed that this scene needed to be washed away. The movers slammed the back door of the final truck and drove off, leaving the driveway empty except for my parents and Destiny. They stood on the sidewalk, huddled under the overhang of the porch, clutching their few suitcases. I stood inside the house. The foyer was empty now. The echo of my heels on the hardwood floor was sharp and clear. I walked to the front door, but I didn't open it. I stood behind the glass panel, looking out at them. My mother Lucinda turned and saw me. Her wig was wet, plastered to her forehead. Her gray dress was soaked, clinging to her frail frame. She looked at me with eyes that were no longer angry, just desperate. She walked up to the glass. She pressed her hand against it. "Sasha," she mouthed. "Please, it is raining. Let us in, just until the rain stops." She knocked on the glass, a hollow, frantic sound. Thomas stood behind her, shivering, looking at his feet. Destiny was sitting on her suitcase, sobbing into her hands, the rain mixing with her tears. I looked at my mother's hand on the glass. I looked at her, shivering, and for a split second, I felt a twinge of pity. But then a memory surfaced. I was 10 years old. It was raining then, too. My mother had walked into my bedroom, the one with the window seat I loved. She told me I had to move to the basement because Destiny needed a dance studio. She said the basement was fine, that I didn't need a view. I remembered crying. I remembered begging. And I remembered her closing the door on me, leaving me in the dark. She had taught me well. She had taught me that comfort is a privilege, not a right. She had taught me that space belongs to those who matter. And today, I mattered. I didn't open the door. I reached out and grabbed the heavy velvet drape that hung by the window. I looked my mother in the eye one last time. I saw her realization. She knew. She remembered. She saw the 10-year-old girl she had discarded looking back at her with the eyes of a woman who held the deed. "Goodbye, Mom," I whispered. I pulled the curtain shut. The heavy fabric slid across the rod with a final swishing sound, blocking out the image of their misery. The gray light of the rainy afternoon vanished, replaced by the dim gloom of the empty house. I turned to the wall switch and flipped it down. The porch light went out. Outside, they were left in the cold, wet darkness. Inside, I was dry. I was warm. And for the first time in my life, I was completely, utterly alone in a house that finally felt like mine. The pheasants had been flushed out. The hunt was over. I walked toward the kitchen to make myself a fresh cup of tea, leaving the sound of the rain and their muffled knocks behind me. They were someone else's problem now. 6 months have passed since the rain stopped on Elm Street. Today, the only water I see is the crystal-clear turquoise of the Indian Ocean stretching out toward the horizon. I am sitting on the teak deck of a private water villa in the Maldives. The air smells like salt and fresh frangipani, a stark contrast to the scent of stale lies and expensive cologne that used to suffocate me. My phone sits on the table next to a platter of exotic fruit. It is silent. For 10 years, my mornings began with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I would wake up to a text from Hunter asking for a bridge loan, or a voicemail from my mother guilt-tripping me about a new dress she needed for a church banquet, or a demand from my father about a roof repair he could not afford. That constant crushing weight known as the black tax is finally gone. My bank account is no longer a community chest for people who despise me. My resources are finally where they belong, investing in my own future. The house on Elm Street is gone. I sold it 2 weeks after the eviction. A nice young couple with a baby on the way bought it. They walked through the empty rooms and saw potential. They didn't know about the screaming matches in the living room or the fraud committed in the study. They didn't see the ghosts of a golden child who threw tantrums or a mother who played favorites. To them, it was just a house. To me, signing those closing papers was the final exorcism. I watched the new owners take the keys, and I felt nothing but relief. The fortress of my family's ego had been converted into liquid cash. But I didn't keep the profit. I didn't need it. My career as a corporate liquidator is thriving more than ever. Instead, I took every cent from the sale of the house, the proceeds from the auctioned furniture, and the money I recovered from selling Destiny's Porsche, and I launched a new project. It is called the Freedom Box Foundation. It is a grant program designed specifically for women like me. Women who are the first in their families to succeed, but who are being dragged down by the financial and emotional abuse of relatives who feel entitled to their labor. We provide financial literacy courses, legal aid for disentangling shared assets, and sometimes just a check to help a woman move into her own apartment and change her phone number. Every time I sign a grant approval, I feel like I am sending a lifeboat back to the girl I used to be. A waiter approaches my deck. He is wearing a crisp, white uniform. He places a fresh pot of Earl Grey tea on the table, the steam rising in the tropical heat. He smiles and asks if I need anything else, perhaps a reservation for the spa later. I look at him. I look at the ocean that separates me from the noise of Atlanta. I look at the life I have built, not for an image, not for approval, but for myself. I have everything I need, I tell him. I realize I am smiling. It is not the polite, tight-lipped smile I wore at family dinners to hide the pain. It is not the sarcastic smile I wore when I evicted my brother-in-law. It is a real smile. It reaches my eyes. My shoulders have dropped 3 inches since I boarded the plane. My skin is glowing not from expensive treatments, but from the lack of stress. I pick up the teacup. It is delicate and beautiful, and this time, no one is going to smash it. I take a sip, tasting the bergamot and the freedom. I am 34 years old. I have no dependents. I have no debt. And for the first time in my entire existence, I am not Sasha the bank or Sasha the scapegoat. I am just Sasha. And that is more than enough. While the sun sets over the Indian Ocean, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, 4,000 miles away, in a cramped apartment complex on the outskirts of Atlanta, the sun is just rising over a very different reality. The air in Unit 4B does not smell of sea salt and freedom. It smells of damp drywall, stale frying oil, and the bitter metallic scent of regret. This is the new kingdom of the Banks family. The apartment is small with thin walls that leak the sounds of neighbors arguing about rent money. There is no Persian rug here. There is only cheap peeling linoleum that sticks to the bottom of your feet in the summer heat. The furniture is mismatched, salvaged from thrift stores, a ghostly echo of the $10,000 leather sofas they watched disappear into the moving truck 6 months ago. Reverend Thomas Banks. The man who once commanded a congregation of 500 souls is currently sitting at the wobbly kitchen table, massaging his swollen feet. He is no longer wearing the purple vestments of a holy man. He is wearing a polyester uniform that is 2 sizes too tight around the waist. On the pocket, a cheap plastic badge reads, Discount Mart Security. Thomas was defrocked 3 weeks after the audit. The church board did not hesitate. When the forensic evidence of his embezzlement came to light, they stripped him of his title, his pension, and his dignity. Now, instead of preaching the gospel, he spends 8 hours a night standing by the automatic doors of a supermarket checking receipts to make sure teenagers are not stealing candy bars. He is 65 years old and his knees ache with every step. He is invisible. The people who walk past him do not see a patriarch. They see a tired, broken old man who has to work the graveyard shift just to keep the lights on. The door to the second bedroom opens and Destiny walks out. The golden child has lost her shine. The blonde highlights have grown out, revealing dark, dull roots because she can no longer afford the $300 salon visits. Her face, once plump with youth and expensive skincare, looks gaunt. There are fine lines around her mouth etched deep by months of frowning. Destiny is wearing a uniform too, an orange polo shirt and black non-slip shoes. She works the breakfast shift at a diner down the highway. It is a place where truck drivers go for cheap coffee. She spends her days wiping grease off tables and being yelled at by customers who think her tips are optional. She hates them. She hates the smell of bacon grease that clings to her hair. But mostly she hates looking in the mirror and seeing her mother staring back. She has become hard. She has become bitter. The princess fantasy is dead. Lucinda is the last to emerge. She sleeps on the pull-out sofa in the living room because Thomas's snoring keeps her awake in the main bedroom. She wakes up angry. She goes to sleep angry. It is the only fuel she has left. She shuffles into the kitchen, wrapping a thin, faded robe around herself. She looks at the empty coffee pot and sighs a loud, dramatic sound that fills the small space. There is no coffee, she complains, not looking at anyone. We are out until Friday, Thomas grumbles, putting on his shoes. Payday is Friday. Lucinda slams a cabinet door. We used to have Kona coffee. We used to have an espresso machine. We used to have a life until that ungrateful witch stole it all. She starts her daily ritual, the recitation of grievances. She talks about me, Sasha, as if I am a demon who descended from the sky to ruin her perfect world. She does not talk about the theft. She does not talk about the years of abuse. She only talks about the consequences. I carried her for 9 months, Lucinda mutters, pacing the small kitchen. I gave her a name. And this is how she repays me. She leaves her mother to rot in this dump while she is off in Paris. Thomas stands up, grabbing his hat. She is in the Maldives, Lucinda. Leave it alone. I will not leave it alone, Lucinda screams. She owes us. She has millions now. I saw the article about her foundation. She is giving money to strangers. To strangers, Thomas. But her own mother has to sleep on a lumpy couch. Destiny grabs her purse, ignoring them. Can you two stop screaming? I have a headache. You have a headache, Lucinda snaps. I have a heartache. My friends don't call me anymore. The church ladies cross the street when they see me. I am a laughingstock, and it is all your sister's fault. Destiny opens the front door to leave, but she stops. Sticking out of the metal mailbox attached to the wall is a thick, cream-colored envelope. It looks like a relic from their past life. Destiny picks it up. Her heart skips a beat. For a second, she thinks it might be a check. What is that? Lucinda asks, her eyes sharpening. It is from Sasha. Destiny whispers. The return address is embossed. The Freedom Box Foundation. Open it. Lucinda rushes forward. Her hands tremble as she tears the expensive paper. She pulls out a card. It is black velvet with gold foil text. You are cordially invited. Lucinda reads aloud, her voice trembling with hope. To the inaugural gala of the Freedom Box Foundation. Celebrating the liberation of women from financial abuse. She flips the card over. She shakes the envelope upside down. There is nothing else. No plane tickets, no check. Where are the tickets? Lucinda asks, panic rising. The gala is in Paris. It is next Saturday. Destiny drops into a chair, a cold laugh bubbling up in her throat. She sent us an invitation to a black tie gala in Paris, Mom. But how do we get there? Thomas asks. We cannot afford a bus ticket. That is the point, Dad. Destiny says. She knows we can't come. She wants us to know that she is celebrating getting away from us. Lucinda stares at the card. The gold letters seem to mock her. Liberated from financial abuse. She realizes finally that she is the abuse. She sent this to taunt me. Lucinda screams, throwing the card across the room. It lands near the trash can. She is evil. No, Thomas says quietly. He looks at his security guard badge. She is not rubbing it in. She is just moving on. And she wanted to make sure we knew we were not invited to follow. Thomas walks out into the gray morning. Destiny heads to the diner. Lucinda is left alone in the cramped, silent apartment, staring at the invitation on the dirty floor. The audience has left the theater. The lights are off. And she is stuck in the dark, with nothing but the echo of her own complaints to keep her company. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the Indian Ocean in streaks of violet and burning orange. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the stilts of my villa. Then a vibration broke the peace. My phone buzzed on the teak table. The screen lit up with 2 words. Unknown caller. I knew who it was. My family had been blocked on every social media platform, every messaging app, and every known number. But desperation always finds a way. I stared at the phone. I could have let it ring. I could have let it vibrate until the battery died. But I realized I wanted to answer. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to hear the sound of a king who realized he had no kingdom left. I swiped the green icon and held the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I just listened to the heavy, ragged breathing on the other end. It sounded like a man who had run a marathon only to find the finish line had been moved. Sasha, the voice crackled. It was Thomas. My father. But the boom was gone from his voice. The pulpit power was gone. He sounded old. He sounded small. I took a sip of my tea. Hello, Dad. There was a pause filled with the static of a cheap international calling card. Sasha, he said, trying to summon a shred of his former authority. Your mother, she is not doing well. This apartment, it is killing her. The humidity is bad for her chest. And Destiny, she is working at a diner, a Banks woman serving coffee. It is a disgrace. I watched a shark swim lazily through the clear water below my deck. That is unfortunate, I said calmly, but I fail to see how that is my problem. Thomas sighed, a sound that was meant to induce guilt, but only induced pity. We have prayed on it, Sasha. Your mother and I. We have prayed day and night. And the Lord has moved our hearts. We are willing to put this behind us. I almost choked on my tea. Put this behind us. Yes, he continued, gaining a little more confidence. We are willing to forgive you. We know you acted out of anger. We know the devil got into your heart for a moment. But you are still our daughter. If you come home, if you help us get set up in a decent place, we will welcome you back. We will not even mention the eviction to the church. We will say it was a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes and let the tropical breeze hit my face. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, standing in the ruins of his life, he still believed he held the power. He still believed his approval was the currency I craved. I let a laugh escape my lips. It started low and rumbled up from my chest until I was laughing openly, a free, unburdened sound that echoed over the water. "You forgive me?" I asked, the amusement dancing in my voice. "Oh, Dad, you really don't get it, do you? You think you are in a position to offer mercy? Sasha? Don't be disrespectful," he snapped, falling back into his old habits. "I am your father. I am offering you a chance to redeem yourself." "No, Dad." I cut him off, my voice turning hard as diamond. "You are not offering me anything. You are begging, and you are doing a terrible job at it." I walked to the edge of the deck, looking out at the endless blue. "Let me make something very clear to you, Thomas. I do not need your forgiveness. I do not need your welcome, and I certainly do not need your family." "But we are blood," he cried out. "Hunter was family too," I reminded him. "And where is Hunter right now?" Silence. We both knew the answer. Hunter was sitting in a county jail cell awaiting trial for fraud, unable to make bail. "Hunter is rotting in a cage because he stole $50,000, I said. "You stole $200,000. You embezzled from orphans to buy a Porsche. By all rights, you should be in the cell next to him." I gripped the railing of the deck. "I am the one who told the forensic accountant to pause the FBI meeting," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I am the one who decided not to press charges for the credit card theft. I am the one who let you walk away with your freedom instead of handcuffs." "Sasha," he stammered. "So do not tell me you forgive me," I said. "I am the one who showed mercy, and the only grace I have left for you is that I am letting you stay out of prison. That is my final gift. Do not ask for another one." "But Sasha," he pleaded, his voice breaking into a sob, "we have nothing." "What about the gift?" "The box. You said you brought a gift to the party." I looked at the black box in my mind, the box that had started the war. I smiled. "You threw that box on the floor, Dad. You called it trash. But you were wrong. It was the most valuable thing I ever gave you." "What do you mean?" he asked. "It was just papers." "No," I said. "That box contained the truth, and the truth set me free. That black box gave me my life back. It gave me my freedom, and that is a gift that keeps on giving." Sasha. "Wait. Please don't hang up." "Goodbye, Dad," I said. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could still hear his tiny, tinny voice shouting my name. I looked at the device. It was the last link, the last tether to a life of misery. I swung my arm back and hurled the phone into the air. It arched beautifully against the sunset, spinning end over end, catching the last rays of the golden light. It hit the water with a satisfying splash and sank instantly to the bottom of the Indian Ocean. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. It was perfect. The movie was over, and the credits were finally rolling on a happy ending. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones holding us back. Sasha's journey teaches us that self-worth is not a price to be negotiated, and family is defined by behavior, not biology. The most courageous thing you can do is cut the cord when the relationship becomes parasitic. Remember, saying no to toxic family members is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. True freedom begins the moment you realize you are enough all on your own. If you have ever had to choose your peace over your family's approval, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who needs to know that walking away is not quitting, it is winning. See you in the next story.